What happened to Spock's two Star Trek proteges? When fans think of Star Trek's most influential characters, Spock inevitably rises near the top. He wasn't just the Enterprise's science officer, he was a philosopher, a bridge between worlds, and a mentor figure whose influence stretched across generations. Unlike Kirk's fiery charisma or McCoy's emotional humanity, Spock's legacy often came through teaching, guiding, and shaping the next wave of Starfleet officers. In fact, across the sprawling Star Trek canon, two characters stand out as Spock's true proteges, individuals who carried his lessons into their own stories and who, in turn, reflected the enduring importance of the Vulcan way. But what became of them? Star Trek has never offered a single, unified answer, and yet the hints scattered across films, shows, and novels create a fascinating picture. To answer that question, we have to revisit who these proteges were, what Spock imparted to them, and how their lives diverged from his. Spock's first protege, Saavik. When Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan 1982 introduced LT. Saavik, she immediately felt like an heir apparent. Played with poise and steel by Kirstie Alley, Saavik was half Vulcan, half Romulan, a detail made canon in the novelizations and hinted at on-screen, and she embodied a younger generation learning to balance discipline and instinct. Her relationship with Spock. Saavik's earliest moments on screen already positioned her as Spock's student. During the Kobayashi Maru test, she commanded the Enterprise simulation with a calm authority, only to experience the crushing inevitability of defeat. Spock, who had once designed the very test, later remarked with a raised Vulcan brow that how we deal with death is at least as important as how we deal with life. This exchange laid the groundwork. Saavik wasn't just another officer, she was a reflection of Spock's own struggles as a hybrid outsider, learning how to reconcile logic and emotion. By Star Trek III, The Search for Spock, she became directly involved in saving her mentor. On the Genesis planet, Saavik cared for the reborn, rapidly aging Spock, helping him through Pon farr, a moment that tied her to him in deeply personal ways. Though the films never dwelled on their connection afterward, the weight of those events lingered in Trek lore. What happened next? After Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home, Saavik essentially vanished from canon. In early drafts, she was meant to reveal her pregnancy with Spock's child, which would have given her a lasting link to him. But those ideas were scrapped, and Robin Curtis, who took over the role, delivered her last lines as Saavik before stepping off the stage entirely. So what happened to Spock's first protege? In canon, she simply disappears, transferred off-screen. Starfleet records, as mentioned in background sources, suggest she continued to serve with distinction, but never reappeared in film or television. In novels, the expanded universe paints a richer picture. Saavik becomes a Starfleet captain, marrying Spock's father Sarek after Amanda's death in some storylines, or raising Spock's child in others. These tales vary wildly, but they consistently underscore her continued role as Spock's spiritual successor. In fan memory, Saavik remains an enigma. Many fans argue her removal was one of Trek's missed opportunities. She could have been the bridge between Spock and later Vulcan characters like Tuvok or even Michael Burnham. Saavik's fate, then, reflects both the limits of 1980s Trek storytelling and the enduring curiosity around characters whose arcs are cut short. Spock's second protege, Valeris. If Saavik represented the path not taken, Valeris, introduced in Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country 1991, was the darker reflection. Played by Kim Cattrall, Valeris was explicitly written as Saavik's replacement, though Nicholas Meyer insisted on creating a new character rather than reusing Saavik for the sake of narrative shock value. Her relationship with Spock. From the start, Valeris seemed to embody Spock's vision for the future. A brilliant young Vulcan, she was handpicked by Spock to serve as his protege aboard the Enterprise A. Spock trusted her, guided her, and even confided in her about his bold plan for peace with the Klingons. He saw her as an extension of himself, the Vulcan who would carry the logic-driven mission forward after his retirement. But then came betrayal. Valeris, it turned out, was part of a conspiracy to assassinate Chancellor Gorkin and sabotage peace. Her logic, she argued, dictated that Klingons and humans were destined for eternal conflict. When Spock discovered her duplicity, the betrayal cut deeply. In one of the film's most haunting moments, Spock performs a forced mind meld on her, dragging out the truth with a mix of anger, desperation, and sorrow. The look on his face said it all. He had invested his trust in her, only to watch it crumble. What happened next? Like Saavik, Valeris never returned to screen canon. We never saw her trial, her punishment, or her later life. She simply disappears from the narrative after the Khitomer conspiracy is unraveled. Still, fans and novels attempted to fill in the blanks. In canon, nothing further is said. Presumably, Valeris was court-martialed and imprisoned or discharged from Starfleet. In expanded lore, some novels suggest she lived out her life in quiet disgrace, while others hint that she attempted redemption through academic work or exile. In symbolism, Valeris' betrayal was a narrative device to underscore Spock's own fallibility. His judgment wasn't perfect. For all his wisdom, he could be wrong, and Valeris was the painful embodiment of that flaw. If Saavik was Spock's bright mirror, Valeris was his shadow, one student who might have carried forward his legacy, and another who rejected it entirely. Spock's legacy as mentor. Taken together, Saavik and Valeris illustrate the duality of Spock's influence. One protege chose loyalty and carried his teachings forward, even if her story was lost in the margins. The other turned away, embodying the dangers of rigid, misguided logic. But perhaps the most important takeaway is that Spock's proteges were never meant to replace him, they were meant to test him. Through them, audiences saw Spock in new roles: teacher, guardian, and even disappointed father figure. They deepened his humanity, showing that mentorship is as much about vulnerability as it is about wisdom. Later echoes, Spock's mentoring legacy didn't end with Saavik and Valeris. In Star Trek: The Next Generation, his mentorship extended to Captain Picard during unification. In Star Trek: Discovery, his relationship with Michael Burnham reimagined his role as a brother mentor. In Star Trek 2009 reboot, the elder Spock guided young Kirk and Spock, becoming a living embodiment of mentorship across timelines. In this sense, Saavik and Valeris were the prototypes. They showed us how Spock could be not just a science officer, but a generational guide whose impact outlived him. Why their stories still matter. So, what happened to Spock's two proteges? The truest answer is that they were left behind, not by narrative logic, but by the shifting needs of film storytelling. Saavik's disappearance was a casualty of behind-the-scenes changes. Valeris' betrayal was designed as a one-off twist. Yet their absence created a vacuum, one fans have been filling with speculation for decades. And that might be the most fitting outcome. Spock himself often wrestled with unfinished questions, paradoxes, and mysteries. To have his students' fates left unresolved feels strangely appropriate, as though the Vulcans' greatest lesson to both them and us was this: some stories are not about closure, but about possibility. Whether Saavik lived to command a starship or Valeris found